Marcus Chen had been awake for 72 hours when the alien ship finally landed on Earth. Not by choice, mind you, but because his emergency medical team at Seattle General had been dealing with a massive highway collision that seemed to produce new victims every few minutes. When the sleek, crystalline vessel descended through the clouds like a falling star, Marcus was in the middle of suturing a child's forehead, his hands steady despite the exhaustion weighing down his shoulders. The Kethmori, as they called themselves, arrived with fanfare that human media couldn't resist. They were tall, elegant beings with translucent skin that shifted colors based on their emotions, and they claimed to represent a galactic confederation of peaceful species. Their leader, Ambassador Veltar, spoke in perfect English through some kind of neural translator, explaining how Earth had been selected for a cultural exchange program. What they didn't mention in their carefully worded speeches was that this program involved selecting humans for entertainment in their gladiatorial arenas across the galaxy. Marcus learned this the hard way when he volunteered for what he thought was a medical mission to help injured aliens on their homeworld. The deception became clear when he woke up in a holding cell carved from black stone, the air thick with the smell of fear and something else he couldn't identify. Through the energy barrier that served as bars, he could see dozens of other cells containing humans from every corner of Earth. Some were soldiers, others were athletes. A few were just unlucky civilians who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. "They took my entire research team," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim from the cell next to his. She was a xenobiologist from Harvard who had been studying alien plant samples. "Said we were volunteers for interspecies cooperation. Instead, they threw us in here with talk about proving human worth in the arenas." Marcus pressed his face against the barrier, trying to see more of their prison. The architecture was alien but impressive, with sweeping curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed like a heartbeat. Everything was built on a massive scale, making him feel like an insect in a giant's palace. The Kethmori guards were different from the ambassador they'd met on Earth. These ones wore armor that looked grown rather than manufactured, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to breathe. Their emotions played across their translucent skin in waves of color, mostly showing amusement and disdain when they looked at the human prisoners. "Fresh meat for the Dragon Coliseum," one guard said in accented English, apparently enjoying the fear his words caused. "The Zephyrin dragons haven't had proper sport in cycles. Humans should provide adequate entertainment before they're consumed." The name sent chills through Marcus. Even in their brief time as prisoners, they'd heard whispers about the Dragon Coliseum from other alien species held in nearby cells. It was supposedly the most prestigious arena in the Kethmori Empire, where their most dangerous predators were kept for the entertainment of the ruling class. The dragons were said to be ancient, intelligent, and utterly without mercy. Days passed in the holding cells, and Marcus began to understand the scope of the Kethmori operation. They weren't just taking humans. They were harvesting warriors and interesting specimens from dozens of worlds across the galaxy. The cells around them contained beings he couldn't even begin to classify, all united by their shared fate as gladiatorial fodder. But Marcus noticed something the guards seemed to miss. While they saw the humans as primitive entertainment, they failed to recognize the intelligence in their eyes, the way information was being quietly shared between cells, the bonds forming between people who had never met but now faced death together. The Kethmori viewed them as animals, but animals that could think and plan. The medical kit they'd allowed him to keep was supposedly for treating minor injuries among the prisoners, but Marcus began to see it differently. Each tool had potential beyond its intended purpose. The surgical laser could be repurposed. The chemical compounds in his medications could be combined in ways that might surprise their captors. More importantly, he began to listen carefully to everything the guards said about the Dragon Coliseum. The arena was ancient, built into a natural canyon on the Kethmori homeworld. The dragons were kept in deep caverns below the main floor, released through mechanical gates when fresh victims were provided. Most creatures lasted less than 5 minutes against a single dragon. Humans, according to the betting pools the guards discussed, were expected to provide perhaps 30 seconds of entertainment before being torn apart. The guards also mentioned something else, almost in passing, that caught Marcus's attention. The dragons had been acting strangely lately, refusing to fight certain prisoners, sometimes even protecting them. The arena masters attributed this to the creatures becoming too well-fed and lazy, but Marcus filed the information away as potentially important. 3 weeks into their captivity, the selection began. Guards moved through the cells, choosing prisoners apparently at random for transport to various arenas. Some went to mining operations, others to gladiatorial schools for training, but a select few were marked for immediate transport to the Dragon Coliseum. Marcus wasn't surprised when they chose him. His medical background made him interesting to creatures who enjoyed toying with their prey, and his physical condition suggested he might last longer than average in the arena. What did surprise him was the almost ceremonial way the guards treated his selection, as if being fed to the dragons was some kind of honor. The transport ship was different from their original prison vessel. This one was ornate, decorated with carvings that seemed to tell stories of past arena victories. Other prisoners on board were equally selected specimens, including 2 professional fighters, a mountain climber, and a former Navy SEAL. All of them looked like they could provide good entertainment before their inevitable deaths. During the journey, Marcus struck up conversations with his fellow condemned. The fighters were focused on strategy, trying to figure out ways to kill a dragon with their bare hands. The SEAL was mapping the ship's layout, apparently planning an escape that everyone knew was impossible. The mountain climber, a woman named Elena, seemed more philosophical about their situation. "I've been thinking about what the guards said," she told Marcus during one of their brief exercise periods, "about the dragons acting strange. What if there's something we don't understand about these creatures?" Marcus had been thinking the same thing. His medical training had taught him to look for patterns others missed, and everything about this situation felt wrong. Why would an advanced galactic civilization need gladiatorial games for entertainment? Why were the dragons sometimes protecting prisoners instead of killing them? And why did the Keth Mori seem almost nervous when discussing the Dragon Coliseum, despite their obvious pride in it? The ship finally arrived at the Keth Mori homeworld, and Marcus got his first look at the Dragon Coliseum through the small viewport in his cell. It was magnificent and terrifying, a massive structure carved into red stone cliffs that rose like cathedrals from the desert floor. The arena itself was a natural canyon enhanced with alien engineering, surrounded by tiers of seating that could hold hundreds of thousands of spectators. But what struck Marcus most was the age of the place. While the Keth Mori ships and cities showed their advanced technology, the Coliseum felt ancient, as if it had existed long before the current civilization. The stonework was different, more organic, and there were symbols carved into the canyon walls that didn't match Keth Mori writing. As they were processed for the arena, Marcus overheard a conversation between 2 Keth Mori officials that made his blood run cold. They weren't just planning to feed him to dragons for entertainment. This was a special exhibition, broadcast across their empire, designed to demonstrate human inferiority to any species considering resistance to Keth Mori expansion. He was to be the opening act, a lone human thrown into the arena with 3 of their largest dragons, expected to provide a few moments of terror before being devoured on live galactic television. The message would be clear. This is what happens to species that resist the Keth Mori Empire. The night before the exhibition, Marcus lay on the stone floor of his cell beneath the arena, listening to the sounds echoing up from the dragon caves far below. The creatures were restless, their calls reverberating through the rock like distant thunder. But there was something about those sounds that didn't fit his expectations. They weren't the roars of mindless beasts waiting for prey. They sounded almost like communication, complex patterns of tone and rhythm that suggested intelligence. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to push down the fear. Tomorrow, he would walk into that arena carrying nothing but his medical knowledge and his determination not to give the Keth Mori the show they expected. He had no illusions about surviving, but he was determined to die in a way that would make them regret choosing him as their demonstration of human weakness. What he didn't know was that far below, in the deep caves beneath the Coliseum, 3 ancient dragons were having a conversation of their own, and the subject of that conversation was the strange new scent that had arrived in their domain, a scent that triggered genetic memories older than the Keth Mori Empire itself. The arena gates groaned open with the sound of ancient machinery, and Marcus stepped onto the red sand of the Dragon Coliseum floor. The roar from the spectator tiers was deafening, hundreds of thousands of alien voices creating a wall of sound that seemed to press against his chest. Above him, the canyon walls rose into a clear purple sky, and he could see floating camera drones positioning themselves to capture every moment of his expected destruction. Ambassador Veltar's voice boomed across the arena through massive speakers, his words translated into dozens of languages for the galactic audience. Citizens of the Confederation, witness the fate that awaits all who would resist our benevolent expansion. Behold the primitive species called humanity, about to face the ancient guardians of this sacred arena. Marcus ignored the speech and focused on his surroundings. The arena floor was larger than a football field, covered in sand that had been stained red by countless battles over the centuries. Scattered across the surface were the bones of previous victims, some clearly alien, others disturbingly familiar in their general humanoid shape. The walls were too high and smooth to climb, and the energy barriers humming along the top made escape impossible. But what drew his attention were the 3 massive gate openings carved into the canyon walls at ground level. Each was big enough to drive a truck through, and from the darkness beyond came the sound of something large moving against stone. The Dragon Caves. He could smell them now, a mixture of sulfur, ozone, and something organic that made his medical training kick in with warnings about apex predators. The crowd's roar intensified as the first gate began to rise. What emerged made Marcus understand why the Keth Mori considered this entertainment suitable for an empire. The dragon was enormous, easily 40 feet from snout to tail, with scales that shifted color like oil on water. Its wings were folded against its back, but even so, it moved with a predator's grace that spoke of intelligence and deadly purpose. But something was wrong. The dragon stepped into the arena and immediately stopped, its massive head turning toward Marcus with an expression that seemed more curious than hungry. When their eyes met, Marcus felt a shock of recognition that made no sense. Those weren't the eyes of a mindless beast. They held intelligence, ancient wisdom, and something that looked almost like surprise. The second gate opened, releasing a dragon even larger than the first. This one was deep emerald green with golden undertones, and it moved with the careful dignity of great age. It too stopped when it saw Marcus, tilting its head in a gesture that was almost bird-like in its inquisitiveness. The third dragon was different from the others, smaller, but somehow more dangerous, with scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When it emerged from its gate, it bypassed Marcus entirely and moved to a position between him and the spectator stands, as if taking a defensive stance. The crowd had gone quiet. This wasn't the immediate slaughter they had expected. Arena officials could be heard shouting orders, trying to understand why their apex predators weren't behaving according to script. The floating cameras moved closer, capturing the unprecedented scene of 3 dragons simply studying a human instead of tearing him apart. Marcus stood perfectly still, his medical training kicking in as he tried to assess the situation. The dragon's body language wasn't aggressive, Their wings remained folded, their stance was relaxed, and none of them had made any move to attack. If anything, they seemed to be waiting for something. The largest dragon, the emerald one, stepped closer. When it spoke, its voice rumbled through the arena like distant thunder, but the words were in no language Marcus recognized. However, the neural translator implanted by the Kethmori kicked in, and he heard the translation with shock. Child of the first bloodline, why do you stand in the place of sacrifice? Before Marcus could process this fully, the first dragon spoke as well. The scent is unmistakable. He carries the mark of the ancient compact, though he clearly does not understand its meaning. The third dragon, the dark one, turned its attention to the spectator stands. When it spoke, its voice carried clearly to every corner of the arena. Kethmori, you have violated the sacred laws. You have brought the protected bloodline to the place of trials without knowledge or consent. The arena erupted in confusion. Spectators were on their feet, some demanding answers, others calling for the dragons to simply kill the human and proceed with the show. In the VIP section, Marcus could see Kethmori officials frantically consulting handheld devices and speaking rapidly into communication units. But Ambassador Veltar's voice cut through the chaos, amplified and commanding. Silence! The creatures speak nonsense. They are beasts, bred for combat and entertainment. Proceed with the exhibition. The reaction from the dragons was immediate and terrifying. All three reared up to their full height, wings spreading wide enough to cast shadows across half the arena floor. The emerald dragon's roar shook dust from the canyon walls, and when it spoke again, its words carried the weight of absolute authority. We are Zephyron, children of the first flame, guardians of the ancient covenants. We are not your creatures, Kethmori. We are bound by laws older than your empire, and this human stands under protection you are too ignorant to recognize. Marcus felt the ground beneath him vibrate as the dragons moved into a defensive formation around him. The dark dragon positioned itself directly in front of him, while the other two flanked his sides. Their message was unmistakable. They would protect him, not devour him. Ambassador Veltar was clearly struggling to maintain control of the situation. The human is a primitive creature, barely evolved beyond animal status. Your sensors must be malfunctioning. The first dragon, the one with oil-slick scales, lowered its great head until it was level with Marcus. When it spoke, its voice was gentle, almost paternal. Child, what is your calling among your people? Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I'm a doctor. I heal people. The dragon's eyes widened, and it turned to address the crowd. He is a healer, a tender of the sacred flame of life. Among his kind, he has chosen the path of the lifeguard, as was foretold in the ancient compact. The emerald dragon moved closer to Marcus as well. Show us your tools, young healer. With trembling hands, Marcus reached into his medical kit and withdrew a surgical laser. The moment the device appeared, all three dragons lowered themselves to the ground in what could only be described as a bow. The gesture sent shockwaves through the watching crowd. The tools of precision healing powered by controlled light, the dark dragon announced. The compact is fulfilled. The children of Terra have achieved the technological mastery to join the ancient fellowship. Marcus stared in confusion. I don't understand. What compact? What fellowship? The emerald dragon's voice carried both sadness and hope. Long ago, before the Kethmori rose to power, before most of these species learned to walk upright, there was a covenant made between the Zephyron and the seedling species of the galaxy. We would watch over the young races, protecting them until they achieved wisdom and the ability to heal rather than merely destroy. The first dragon continued the explanation. Your species was marked for protection when we first observed your world. We saw the potential for great healing or great destruction, and we chose to wait and watch. When members of your kind chose to dedicate their lives to preserving life rather than taking it, despite having the capability for both, you proved yourselves worthy of protection. The arena had gone completely silent. Even the Kethmori officials seemed frozen as the implications of the dragon's words became clear. This wasn't just a gladiatorial exhibition gone wrong. This was a revelation that challenged the fundamental structure of their empire. Ambassador Veltar's voice crackled over the speakers, but now it carried desperation rather than authority. This is impossible. Humans are a primitive species. They have barely achieved interstellar travel. The dark dragon's laughter was like controlled thunder. Primitive? They have achieved something your species never has, Kethmori. They have learned to value the lives of others above their own advancement. This human stands before you not as a warrior, but as one who has sworn to heal even his enemies. Marcus felt a strange surge of pride mixed with terror. He was beginning to understand that he hadn't just been thrown into an arena for entertainment. He had accidentally triggered some kind of ancient galactic law that the Kethmori had either forgotten or chosen to ignore. The Emerald Dragon turned its attention back to him. Marcus Chen of Terra, you stand at a crossroads. We can protect you and return you to your world, but in doing so, we would reveal to the galaxy that the Kethmori have built their empire on the enslavement of protected species. The consequences would be significant. The political implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If these dragons were telling the truth, the Kethmori had been kidnapping and enslaving members of species that were supposed to be under some kind of galactic protection. The revelation would destroy their empire and potentially start a galactic war. But before he could respond, the arena's defensive systems activated. Energy weapons emerged from hidden positions throughout the Coliseum, all aimed at the dragons. Veltar's voice boomed across the space, no longer diplomatic but openly threatening. Enough! Whatever ancient nonsense you speak, the reality is simple. You are in Kethmori space, subject to Kethmori law. You will kill the human and return to your caves, or you will be destroyed. The three dragons' reaction was swift and coordinated. Their wings spread wide, and Marcus could see energy beginning to build in their throats as they prepared to breathe fire. But they didn't attack the weapons or the crowd. Instead, they began to sing. The sound was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It started as a low harmonic that seemed to come from the earth itself, then built into something that transcended music and became pure communication. The song carried across the arena, through the canyon walls, and out into space itself. It was a call for help, Marcus realized. These dragons were sending a message to someone, somewhere, announcing that the ancient compact had been violated and that a protected species needed immediate assistance. The Kethmori weapons fired, sending streams of energy toward the dragons, but the beams seemed to bend around the creatures, deflected by some kind of protective field that Marcus couldn't see. The dragons continued their song, and now Marcus could feel vibrations in the ground beneath his feet that had nothing to do with sound. Something was coming, something that would change everything. The sky above the Dragon Coliseum began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement, and then it simply tore open. What emerged through the rift defied Marcus's understanding of physics and engineering. Ships poured through the opening in space, but they weren't built like any vessel he'd ever seen. They moved like living things, their hulls shifting and flowing as if made from liquid metal and pure energy. The lead ship was enormous, easily the size of a city, and as it descended toward the arena, Marcus could see that its surface was covered with the same oil-slick scales as the dragon that had first spoken to him. This wasn't just a rescue fleet. These were the Zephron themselves, the ancient species that the dragons in the arena represented. Ambassador Veltar's voice cracked over the arena speakers, no longer commanding but desperate. This is Kethmori sovereign territory. You have no authority here. The response came not from the ships, but from the dragon beside Marcus. The emerald giant lifted its head toward the sky and spoke in its thunderous voice. But now Marcus could hear the formal cadences of someone delivering an official proclamation. By the authority of the first compact established before your sun was kindled, the Zephyron Protectorate hereby revokes all Kethmori claims to this system and all systems containing protected species. Your empire is built upon violations of galactic law so ancient you have forgotten it exists. The largest ship settled into a hover position directly above the arena, and from its belly, a beam of golden light descended to envelop Marcus and the three dragons. But instead of feeling trapped, Marcus felt safer than he had since this entire nightmare began. The light was warm, comforting, and it seemed to strengthen the dragons around him. From within the beam, a new voice spoke, and this one carried the weight of eons. I am Elder Nithara of the First Flame, speaker for the Zephyron Protectorate. Kethmori, you stand accused of violating the sacred compact of protected evolution. How do you answer? The arena had gone completely silent. Even the Kethmori energy weapons had powered down, as if recognizing that they were useless against technology this advanced. Marcus could see alien spectators throughout the stands looking up at the ships with expressions of fear and awe. Ambassador Veltar tried to maintain his authority, but his voice shook. We recognize no authority higher than the Kethmori Confederation. These creatures are subjects within our empire, bred for our entertainment. The laughter that came from Elder Nithara was like the sound of stars being born. Subjects? Child, my people were exploring the galaxy when yours were still learning to make fire. These dragons you call your creatures are our younglings, placed here to watch over developing species and report when they achieved the wisdom to join galactic civilization. The emerald dragon beside Marcus raised its head proudly. Elder, the human species has achieved the markers of protection. They have mastered precision healing. They value life preservation over personal gain, and they have chosen to help rather than harm even when faced with death. Elder Nithara's voice grew warmer as she addressed Marcus directly. Marcus Chen of Terra, your species stands at a crossroads. You have achieved the technological capability to join the galactic community. But more importantly, you have demonstrated the wisdom to use that technology for healing rather than conquest. The compact recognizes humanity as a protected species under Zephyron guardianship. The implications of those words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Humanity wasn't just being rescued. They were being officially recognized as worthy of protection by what seemed to be the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilization. But that protection came with a price that would be paid by the Kethmori Empire. Ambassador Veltar seemed to realize this as well. You cannot simply declare our empire invalid. We have expanded across hundreds of systems. Millions of beings depend on our governance. Governance? Elder Nithara's voice carried clear disdain. You have built a slave empire, taking members of protected species as gladiatorial entertainment and forced labor. Did you think there would be no consequences? Around the arena, Marcus could see more ships descending from the rift in space. But these weren't all Zephyron vessels. Some had the organic curves of species he didn't recognize. Others looked like crystalline constructs that sang as they moved. It was a fleet representing multiple civilizations, all apparently allied with the Zephyron Protectorate. The dark dragon beside Marcus stepped forward. Elder, what is the Council's judgment regarding the Kethmori violations? The judgment is dissolution, Elder Nithara announced, her words carrying across the arena and beyond to the watching galaxy. The Kethmori Empire has forfeited its right to self-governance through systematic violation of galactic law. Their territory will be redistributed among species capable of protecting rather than exploiting developing civilizations. The arena erupted in chaos. Kethmori officials were screaming orders, trying to coordinate some kind of response to what was essentially the end of their empire. But their weapons were useless, their authority meaningless in the face of technology and legal precedent they had never imagined existed. Marcus found his voice again. What about the humans they've taken? The other species in their arenas? Elder Nithara's response was immediate. All abducted beings will be returned to their homeworlds with our apologies for failing to prevent their capture. The Zephyron take full responsibility for not monitoring Kethmori expansion more carefully. The golden beam surrounding Marcus began to lift him toward the ship above, but he resisted. Wait, I want to understand something. Why me? Why was I the one who triggered this compact? The Emerald Dragon answered before Elder Nithara could respond. Because you represent the best of your species, Marcus Chen. When faced with death, you remained committed to healing. When offered the chance for revenge against your captors, you chose understanding instead. You proved that humanity deserves protection, not because of your technology, but because of your wisdom. As Marcus rose toward the Zephyron ship, he could see the full scope of what was happening. The rift in space had expanded, and ships were pouring through in an endless stream. Some were heading for other parts of the Kethmori Empire, while others were taking positions around key strategic points. This wasn't just a rescue operation, it was a complete regime change on a galactic scale. Ambassador Veltar made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. The other galactic powers will not stand for this interference. The Kethmori have allies. Elder Nithara's response was gentle but final. Your allies are welcome to contest our actions through the proper legal channels, but they will find that the Galactic Council of Elder Species unanimously supports the enforcement of the Sacred Compact. Your empire was illegal from its founding. Marcus was pulled into the Zephyron ship through what felt like a membrane of light rather than a solid hatch. Inside, the vessel defied his expectations again. Instead of mechanical corridors and technological interfaces, the interior felt organic, alive, as if he were inside some massive creature that happened to be capable of interstellar travel. Elder Nithara met him in what could only be described as a garden chamber, a space filled with plants and flowing water that seemed to exist in perfect harmony with the ship's technology. She was magnificent, easily twice the size of the dragons in the arena, with scales that held the depth of space itself. When she spoke, her voice resonated through the chamber like music. Marcus Chen, you have inadvertently triggered the most significant galactic political event in 10,000 years. How do you feel about that responsibility? Marcus looked at this ancient being who had just dismantled an empire to protect his species and gave the only answer he could. Terrified, but grateful. What happens to humanity now? Elder Nithara settled onto what appeared to be a crystalline platform that molded itself to her form. Now your species learns. We will provide guidance, protection, and access to technologies that will benefit your people. But the choices about how to use these gifts will be yours to make. And the other humans the Kethmori captured? Already being located and freed. Your Dr. Sarah Kim is quite insistent about cataloging every alien species she encounters, by the way. I believe she will fit in well with our xenobiological research teams. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the organic chamber. After everything he had been through, the idea of Sarah turning her captivity into a research opportunity seemed perfectly in character. There is something else you should know, Elder Nithara continued. The dragons who protected you in the arena have requested permission to return to Earth with you. They wish to serve as formal ambassadors between our species. The idea of dragons serving as ambassadors to Earth was so surreal that Marcus had to sit down on what he hoped was a chair. It molded itself to support him perfectly, confirming his suspicion that everything on this ship was somehow alive. Will people accept that? Dragons from mythology suddenly becoming real and diplomatic? Elder Nythera's eyes held ancient humor. Your species has proven remarkably adaptable. Besides, these particular dragons have been quite fond of Earth since we first placed them there to monitor your development. They're excited about the opportunity to interact openly with humanity. Placed them there? Marcus's medical mind immediately started working through the implications. You mean dragons aren't just alien creatures that look like Earth mythology? They actually... Your myths exist because we have been watching over your species for millennia, Marcus Chen. The stories of dragons, of benevolent spirits, of guardians who appear in times of great need. These come from occasional encounters with our watchers. Your species has been under protection longer than your recorded history. The weight of this revelation settled over Marcus as he realized the true scope of what had happened. Humanity hadn't just been accidentally protected by triggering an ancient law. They had been deliberately watched over and guided for thousands of years, waiting until they proved themselves worthy of direct contact. What about the Keth Mori people themselves? Marcus asked. Not the government, but the ordinary citizens. They didn't choose to build an empire on slavery. Elder Nithara's expression grew approving. Spoken like a true healer. The Keth Mori civilians will be protected and relocated to worlds where they can build a new society based on cooperation rather than conquest. Some may even choose to work with the Protectorate to help other developing species avoid the mistakes their leaders made. As the ship carrying Marcus back toward Earth moved through the rift in space, he looked out through what appeared to be a transparent section of the hull and saw the Dragon Coliseum far below. The arena where he had expected to die was now filled with Zephyrin ships, and he could see beings of dozens of species being freed from the holding cells beneath the stands. But what struck him most was the sight of the 3 dragons who had protected him. They were ascending toward the ship in beams of light, similar to the one that had lifted him, but they moved with obvious joy. Their wings spread wide as they rose toward freedom and a new purpose as ambassadors to Earth. Marcus Chen had entered the Dragon Coliseum as a sacrifice to alien entertainment. He was leaving as the inadvertent catalyst for the liberation of countless species and the beginning of humanity's true entry into galactic civilization. And somehow, that felt exactly like the kind of impossible situation that a doctor who had volunteered to help aliens would find himself in. The rift in space closed behind them as Earth grew larger in the viewport, and Marcus began to wonder how exactly he was going to explain to his colleagues at Seattle General that his medical mission had accidentally triggered a galactic revolution. But knowing Sarah, she would probably just ask if he had brought back any interesting tissue samples for research.